Welcome back. By the end of the school year, last school year, many students across the nation returned to class full time. And according to a new report by the Northwest Evaluation Association, getting back to in-person learning showing signs of academic rebound. On tonight's Unfiltered, one of the study's researchers, Dr. Karen Lewis, says the results aren't quite a cause for celebration. Dr. Lewis, we really appreciate you taking some time. This report, eye-opening stuff. And it does show that kids are making progress, but not to the point that we were hoping for, especially not really to the point of pre-pandemic levels. So what needs to be done in order for that to happen?
I think it's a complicated story. We need to take a moment, I think, to celebrate that this is good news. If we look back to last year when kids were making gains at a pretty sluggish pace, we have surpassed that. It seems like kids are getting back on track in terms of the gains they've made this year, but we still have a pretty deep hole to dig ourselves out of. So the way I think about it is at least the bleeding has stopped and now healing can begin. And it's a matter of getting kids the resources and supports they need to add back in those instructional opportunities that have been lost throughout the pandemic when schools have shut down and schools have had to confront staff shortages and reacclimating kids to the learning environment. Really now it's a matter of buckling down and getting them those learning supports they need to make up those pandemic impacts.
The report also points out that middle schoolers are struggling much more than elementary school students. Why is that?
I think it's probably due to the fact that the research like myself and my colleagues have done, but our peers have also found that the youngest students have been hardest hit throughout the pandemic. And I think we probably saw schools and districts taking a kind of triage approach, that they were getting elementary students more supports because there was a larger need there. And in so doing, it may be the case that middle schoolers have been left behind, and we see less evidence that we're seeing improvements among those students in this most recent school year.
And is that why you focused on middle school and elementary and not high school?
Our data coverage is better in the grades 3 through 8. Our test is used in high schools, but at a smaller rate. So we have less confidence in being able to generalize our findings across the nation as a whole, since we just have fewer tests taken among high school students.
This is a pretty large study, right?
Yeah, we have over 8 million students that we look at across the pandemic period and compare them to another sample of 8 million students prior to the pandemic.
So what surprised you the most when you came up with this research and the findings? What was the biggest surprise in your opinion?
I think when we went to hit run on the computer code to get these results, it was a scary moment, knowing that this year was still incredibly challenging for educators. It was not the full comeback that I think we were all hoping for, knowing schools were still facing significant challenges. So that we see any signs of improvement at all was a happy surprise, and one I don't want to lose sight of. We still have a long way to go to get kids back on track, but I think that we do want to make sure we call this a win, because it certainly was, knowing what schools were up against this last year.
What learning lessons came out of this?
I think the big one is that we still see that the pandemic has been uneven in its consequences, and students in high poverty schools, Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous students have been hardest hit and continue to show the largest gaps between current and pre-pandemic achievement. So what we really need to keep in mind is when we go to try and support students and get them back on track, we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach, because it hasn't been a one-size-fits-all pandemic. And we need to be really mindful of getting students supports in proportion to their needs to make sure we're able to shrink those gaps.
Okay. Dr. Lewis, we really appreciate you taking some time. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for your research tonight.
Thank you.